Welcome back to the Done Deal Show. Breaking news. Manchester United closing in on a deal to sign the Belgium goalkeeper Lammens. We'll be delving into that with Ben Jacobs, who exclusively revealed the link many weeks ago. Spoke yesterday on the United stand about United still being in these talks. We're going to be touching on Eze and what's next for Arsenal on this show. We're going to look ahead of a potential new bid for Alexander Isak as well, plus much more. So stick with us for the next 45 minutes to hour or so. Get the like buttons hit, though. Get yourself subscribing and make sure that bell notification button is turned on as well. But good morning, Ben. And another crazy day in Gotham City.
Yes, exactly. I don't think we're going to get a crazier day or evening than the Eze Arsenal hijack, and that move is being formalized as we speak. But naturally, time is ticking away. So I think we are expecting several done deals across all of Europe in the coming days. And I reckon, just a gut feeling, it's going to be the busiest end to a summer window we've seen in quite some time. You know, sometimes we say deadline day is a bit of an anti-climax. I'm not sure this one will be.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like it's going to be an anti-climax in any way, shape or form. And obviously the big breaking news, I say big breaking news, you revealed this yesterday that Manchester United are still working on the deal for Lammens. You've confirmed before that personal terms, I believe you've said before, personal terms won't be an issue in this deal. Fabrizio Romano just putting out this news, as he states, Man United will try to anticipate more clubs from France moving. It says also based on exits, but it feels like Man United are closing in on a potential new goalkeeper signing.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can say closing in at the moment, but they're certainly still in talks and the deal is not dead. The reason why I wouldn't quite go as far yet anyway is say closing in, but of course things can move at super speed because we've not got much time left in the window. Yeah. But Manchester United are aware that Andre Onana is the number one. It looks like he's going to stay, and Bayindir is still at the football club. So if Bayindir had left, then I think Sané Lammens would already be a Manchester United player. At the moment, they're having to decide if they want to move ahead now and get ahead of the market and bring in a young goalkeeper, or if alternatively they're prepared to wait. And there could be a scenario like we discussed yesterday where they try and pre-agree this one, but he doesn't actually end up at Manchester United for a year's time, very similar to what Liverpool did with Mamadashvili. And this is the thinking at the moment within the club. Can they get the buy-in? Will the player wait? Do they need to do it now? And if they do it now, do they bring him? And then there's a conversation to be had about Bayindir, or do they actually allow him to stay where he is and pre-agree it or loan him back? All of these kind of formulas still need to be discussed. So what's happening at the moment is the deal is not dead. I know we have heard suggestions of other clubs in places like France and Italy, and some reports even saying Man City. But Manchester United have been at the table for Sané Lammens for months. And what they're looking to do now is get that full player buy-in, which still could come in the next few days. And then in likelihood, they'll start club-to-club talks to work out what may or may not be possible. So it is still quite quiet on the goalkeeper front. But if one is to come in, as I said yesterday, I do think it will be Sané Lammens, and Manchester United are quite confident that they can, in the coming few days, agree personal terms. And then we'll see whether or not they're going to move. Because, of course, if the player says, I'm prepared to wait for Manchester United, I want this move, then you have less urgency to necessarily, if Bayindir stays, agree it right now. And all of these conversations are very fluid. They're very ongoing. I wouldn't want to mislead anyone and say it's close or definite at this stage. But as I said yesterday on the United stand, the deal with Manchester United at the time we're live is not dead.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, United fans are going to get excited. We really rate this goalkeeper. In terms of what your views on the player, I know you do a lot of research into the players, how they play, how they operate. Is this a player that United fans should look at and say, you know, straight away in the first team? Is it a player to develop? What's the understanding around United's view of this potential new this potential new goalkeeper?
Yeah, he's obviously very young as far as a goalkeeper is concerned. So if he does join Manchester United or any other club, he would likely come in as a number two, a player potentially for the now in things like League Cup, FA Cup, but predominantly for the future to be developed. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. I think he has a lot of attributes that would take very well to the Premier League and to Manchester United. He is very similar, in my opinion, in his instinct and his shot stopping to a profile like Mike Enders, who Chelsea have signed and loaned to Strasbourg, which again is another indication that these kind of goalkeepers in this age group maybe need some experience and a bit more game time before they're thrown into the deep end. What I like about him is he's very brave in his own 6-yard area.
Mm-hmm.
He has that good intuitiveness to kind of know when to come off his line, when to punch, not afraid to catch. He's loud, he's commanding, and all of that is definitely very welcome in the Premier League, because we see this sort of increasing drive in all the big leagues, really, for set pieces and corners to be put right under the goalkeeper. Someone was telling me the other day that set piece coaches are basically, under certain circumstances, telling their corner kick takers to not go for the near post anymore, because the old sort of belief with set pieces and crosses was if you whip it in at the near post, if you're able to beat the first man, you stand a very strong chance of success. The problem is, statistically, 7 out of 10 times you don't beat the first man. So now a lot of crossers and set piece takers, they're going for a kind of Olympico towards the back post. And what actually happens is that a cluster of players move from the back of the 6-yard area towards the front. So if it beats the first man, maybe you get a flick at the near post. If it beats everyone, it goes to the back post, and it asks a question of the goalkeeper. And if they stay on their line, there's a fair chance that any touch results in a goal. So goalkeepers are now being taught that they have to be more physical, they have to be braver, and he's of that mold. So you're going to see a very commanding goalkeeper. He's good with his feet. He's got excellent distribution as well. Where I think he needs to improve, I believe, is near post and going down too early. And let me be clear, we're talking about minor constructive criticism, speaking to people that have worked with the player. We're not talking about someone that's going to be beaten easily at his near post, or somebody that's always going to go down and therefore get chipped when a one-on-one takes place. But basically, he's been focused in his development, I'm told, from coaches that have worked with him, on making sure that his athleticism builds and that his shot stopping is strong. And sometimes when you're so intent on just reacting, you can move a little bit too early. And therefore, if a player is clever and waits and delays, you get beaten. So he's being taught actually not to react with his body at the moment. This is a development stage, but to actually think about keeping his eyes on ball and player and trying to read the player, not just the ball. And then the reason why I say near post is because there's two different kinds of goalkeepers. Some prefer to have maximum protection and play the odds and protect their near post and trust themselves to get across to their far post to make the save. Others are goalkeepers that are more confident and invite a certain area of the goal. Petr Cech was the best example of this. He would happily take a step forwards or take a step to his left towards his far post and actually say, if you're going to beat me at the near post, fine, I'll give you that little bit of space, but I'm going to play the odds and I'm going to give myself the ability to get to the far post. And Sané Lammens is like that. He'll give you a part of the goal and he'll say, go for it if you want, because I still think I'll get there and I'll invite you there. But then if you go for the harder save for me, I've got one step already in that direction, which leads to more spectacular saves, but can leave you a bit susceptible at your near post. So that's kind of where he's at the moment. All of these things need developing. And again, if he ends up joining Manchester United, I would imagine that he'll have plenty of time because he's coming in as a number 2, not a number 1, if the deal gets over the line.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And for me, there's almost an element of me kind of preferring whether it's the truth, and I believe what you're telling us here, or whether it's spin, because people will have that opinion. So I'm talking about both sides of that argument. I like the idea of him coming in, being packaged as a number 2 or as a number 2. I think you come in with a little bit less pressure. At Manchester United, in my lifetime, obviously we had some goalkeepers before Schmeichel that weren't good enough, but it took 2 or 3 goalkeepers after Schmeichel to find a replacement. It feels like we've gone through a very similar situation when David De Gea has gone past his peak. You know, finding a new goalkeeper has always been hard for us as a club. There's a pressure that comes with it. So maybe coming in as a developmental player, as a number 2, being given opportunities and being bled into the first team is a better approach than dropping £40 million on an Emi Martinez. And it's right now because I think it's one of the most pressured jobs in football. I think the only other role that's maybe more pressured in football is England's number one. In actual fact, those are two roles. Man United's number one and the number one of England always seem to me to be roles that just have such pressure built upon them in football. So, I think a really good way for us to approach this.
Yeah, and I think with the number one, it's about a market opportunity. So we know that they tried audaciously to loan Emi Martinez. That is a clue that the number one position has also been discussed. Gigi Donnarumma at the moment looks like he's leaving PSG. If Ederson goes to Galatasaray, then I think Donnarumma might still end up at Man City. But PSG are asking for 40 million or more. Aston Villa were asking for 35 or 40 million if they're to sell Emi Martinez. So the number one has been a topic of conversation. And you can never rule out a number one move at Manchester United because the window is open and they are going to have to look at Onana, but he hasn't been told he's not the number one. So I think what will probably happen is they'll continue to look at market opportunities. And then if nothing is available at market value in the next sort of 10 days for any goalkeeper, they won't sign one, whether a number one or a number two. There won't be a panic buy because Bayindir and Onana are still there. But it wouldn't surprise me if in 12 months' time, the topic of a number one at Manchester United is still something that we're having. By that stage, there might be more market value opportunities because if you think about it, Emi Martinez, should he stay at Aston Villa, will have 1 year left on 1 year less, I should say, on his contract. So 2 years remaining. Mike Maignan, as it stands, will be a free agent. Donnarumma, if he goes nowhere, will be a free agent. So this has been the summer of strikers. Last summer was the summer of midfielders. And I think next summer, there'll be several goalkeepers at really good market value, some of them free agents on the market. And that's why I think we will be speaking about Manchester United and goalkeepers for quite some time, even if they had a young one between now and when the window shuts.
Comprehensive update as ever. On the midfield situation, obviously a story that started to trend massively last night based on some information that you put out yourself along with Sam regarding, I nearly said Ben Stiller for a moment there. But Angelo Stiller, it's probably not pronounced Stiller because he's German, but it might be. But Angelo Stiller, very exciting young midfield player linked to Man United. What can you tell us about those links and any expectation of progression in the next 9 days?
No, I mean, as I said in the reporting, there's no guarantee that anything develops. So I would expect certain people to be downplaying it. But I can guarantee you Manchester United have discussed Angelo Stiller internally, whereas I respect other reporting, and naturally Stuttgart's position will be no contact, no bid, no expectation that he leaves. But internally at Manchester United, he's one of the names that they've discussed. And that's pretty much it at the moment. So not a great deal to get excited about. It's going to be tough if they were to proceed to get him out of Stuttgart now, because there is a release clause, but it's not active until summer 2026. And naturally, people are very excited because they want another midfielder to come in now. But like we said on the United stand yesterday, there's also no guarantee of that. I'm quite skeptical of another midfielder arriving because it has to be the right profile at the right value. We're not talking about a body for the sake of it. And I don't even think we're talking about a squad player, because they know that in summer 2026, they're going to be back in likelihood for Carlos Baleba. And that money that they were prepared to spend this summer before they were clear that Brighton were not going to sell is actually kind of taken from summer 2026 budget. So if they go and spend 50, 60 million on a midfielder now, then that's almost coming out of the Baleba budget. And I'm told Ruben Amorim does not want just another squad player. At the beginning of the window, it was discussed, maybe you go for an Ndidi, who's now at Besiktas. You get a proven Premier League player, another body, somebody that is athletic and is an engine room midfielder. But are they going to start? Not necessarily. Are they an upgrade on your starting 11? Probably not, with respect to Wilfred Ndidi. Not because he's not a fantastic player, but is he better than Manuel Ugarte, Kobbie Mainoo? He's probably at best on a par. And then you have to think about the age of Ndidi, and maybe you decide not to make that move. So Manchester United held talks, but they didn't proceed. So it's obvious the sort of description of what they're looking for is categorically a starter, a long-term player, and a top talent at elite level that will be catapulted straight into that central midfield, like when Arsenal signed Declan Rice, like when Chelsea signed Moises Caicedo. That is what Amorim, Wilcox, Vivell want. And if they can't get that, I don't think they'll sign a midfielder for the sake of it. So I repeat what we said yesterday on the United stand, because things get taken out of context wildly. I'm skeptical any midfielder will arrive, but it is true they've discussed Stiller. It's only something internal. They're looking at him. It might not be something that they pull off in the last 10 days of the window. In fact, I've got low confidence that anything will be possible, because I'm not so sure that Stuttgart will want to sell, but he's one of the names that's come up in conversation. He's one of the targets that they've discussed. But let's even see if Manchester United do add a midfielder between now and the end of the window.
Yeah, it's certainly it is exciting, as well as a new title name for when you and I stream together. I never thought of this, but this is maybe one of the best branding names a show could ever have. Ben and Terry's. It's very good. Sorry, someone put it in the chat, and I caught my eye, and I was like, it's very, very good. I like it.
We'll do it as long as the actual Ben and Jerry's sponsor us, and then
well, that's it.
Ice cream.
Yeah, no money. I just want some free fish food, some free caramel crunch, whatever it's called.
Come on, I like cookie dough. Cookie
dough is good. I do prefer fish food, but yeah, I like a bit of Ben and Jerry's. But I'm gonna get onto the commercial team. That is one for them. Ben and Terry's transfer talk, sponsored by Ben and Jerry's. It's got a ring to it. I like that. But look, I think United fans obviously want a midfielder, but I agree with the approach. I don't just want to spend 30-40 million on a filler who doesn't really improve us that much. Who, once we actually go after our main targets next summer, Beliebers, Whartons, I'm just throwing names out there, they don't really have a place. It feels like a bit of a waste for us. I'd rather save the money and wait for a number one target, or as you know, put it into a goalkeeper or invest in some youth for the future. I'd rather do. I know everyone wants to fix things instantly, but I feel that over the last 12, 13 years, we've done so much sort of papering over cracks, as it were, as opposed to fixing the actual problems, that we never really move forward quick enough or permanently enough, because we end up running out of money, because we're still not good sellers. And until we start getting Chelsea level exits and City level exits, and we start getting 30-40 million pounds of players that haven't kicked balls for us like Liverpool seem to be able to do, we need to be very prudent with how we spend our money, in my point of view. But
yeah, to an extent, although what I would say is that in the next financial cycle, and even in this 3-year cycle that ended June the 30th, some of the big amortizations either have dropped off or will drop off. And there's still, I think, some kind of book value. In other words, when a club thinks a player might leave within 2 years, they'll attribute a book value, because they're effectively budgeting and saying at some point we're going to get this fee. So Brighton will have a book value for Carlos Baleba in their budgets in the long term. And it might be quite pessimistic, because you're never going to budget at the optimistic side. You'd always plan for a bit lower. And then if you get a bit higher, great. So Manchester United, for me, kind of know that there's a likelihood that Bruno Fernandes will engage with suitors in a year's time. It doesn't mean he's definitively going to leave, but unlike this summer, I think Manchester United know that Bruno Fernandes might consider an exit in a year's time. Some may depend on, do Manchester United get Champions League? How's the project developing? But I think Manchester United understand that they can still get a big fee for Bruno Fernandes, potentially from Saudi Arabia. They understand that Casemiro's wage eventually coming off the books will be important. And if you add those two up, and it did happen next summer, and it is an if, I stress, then they will have a bit of money to spend. And then if you couple that, and it's another big if, with Champions League football, plus some amortizations dropping off, suddenly they could be in quite a healthy position. So I've always been led to believe that this PSR cycle, the financial year that's just shut, was the hardest for Manchester United to navigate, and they feel compliant. But actually, when we get to next summer, especially with Champions League football, they will feel a little bit anyway like they've got more headroom.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of the exits, we know of the links of Garnacho to Chelsea, which Chelsea fans would like an update on. But also last night, there were some rumours going around that Spurs could try and enter this race, although we know that Garnacho has been saying no to everybody else. But I think I remember you saying yesterday on the United stand that he does keep saying he's waiting, but what if the bid never comes? Footballers often change their mind. So have you heard anything about Tottenham getting involved? Is there more movement in the Garnacho exit to Chelsea?
Not necessarily. I mean, right at the beginning of the window, you had Spurs, Villa, Chelsea for Garnacho because it was obvious that Son was leaving. Matis Tel was going to be signed permanently, but they wanted one more on the left-hand side. Now we have to understand whether Thomas Frank influences the situation and Garnacho is a player he wants. Tottenham's top target remains Savinho. It's being blocked at board level. So if nothing gives, Savinho stays. But if something gives, Spurs are definitely going to bid again for Savinho. He's their top target on that left-hand side. And then, of course, it might open the door for Rodrygo to go to Manchester City. So that's a story to keep an eye on, but it all depends basically on the Man City board. Savinho said he's keen on Spurs. Pep Guardiola may not stand in his way, but you have a scenario where at board level, they think that Savinho is going to be one of these elite players, a bit like Cole Palmer, that if they let go, they're going to regret near instantly. And that is kind of where we're at right now. So any other left-wing target will only become prevalent for Tottenham if Savinho becomes dead. And I'm not so sure yet that Tottenham have given up. I think if they'd have got Eberechi Eze, they might have gone, let's try other younger or cheaper left-wing profiles. But it wouldn't surprise me if Daniel Levy doubles down now and says we need to leave this window, having missed out on Gibbs-White and Eze, with a real star signing akin to Mohamed Kudus that's going to excite these Tottenham supporters. And that's what I think we just need to still keep an eye, at least on the Savinho case, even though in the last few weeks it's been very difficult. With Garnacho and Chelsea, it's obvious Garnacho wants Chelsea. And I come back to what we've said many times. I think we mentioned it yesterday on the United stand. So sorry if I repeat myself to people that were listening to that show. Man United want 50 million. They think it's a fair price. Noni Madueke went to Arsenal. Chelsea did that sale, 48 plus 4. So Garnacho should be a similar ballpark. Then you have Chelsea knowing Man United want to sell, knowing the player wants the move. So they're waiting, not because the deal club to club is necessarily in doubt, but it's a tactic because Chelsea know it's their best chance of the price dropping a little bit south of 50 million. And we have to wait and see who caves. And of course, Man United would welcome a bid from another club and will fuel a bid from another club because that helps them get their 50 million and create a bidding war. Right now as well, Chelsea are working on Nkunku exit. Let's see where he goes. They're trying to get Nico Jackson out. I think we're going to get movement on Nicholas Jackson in the next 72 hours or so. You got Villa, Newcastle, Bayern, even Milan could re-enter the race if the price drops too. So Chelsea are juggling a lot of things at the moment, but they remain confident that if they create the squad space and if they get their A-list registration for the Champions League, which is the big thing at the moment, because you have to get outgoings and specifically balance the books to make sure all their new signings in September can be registered for the Champions League. So this is where Nkunku and Jackson come in. Those are the two they want out. And then I would expect them to move pretty quickly for Alejandro Garnacho. I think an exit will suit all parties. And obviously with Xavi Simons, it's a bit more complicated because there is no asking price yet that has really been agreed or close there. Whereas with Garnacho, even though they've not got a fee in place, I think the feeling is that Manchester United and Chelsea might end up meeting halfway because, like I said a moment ago, it will suit all parties for Garnacho to leave.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of Chelsea fans have sort of, I mean, they DM me, have I heard anything? And I'm like, well, I'm not a journalist, but I'll ask people. The Xavi Simons deal, I remember talking to a few journalists privately, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, that said it feels like this is a deal that will definitely happen and could happen quite quickly. But it does feel from especially an outsider looking in, like it's really dragging its heels.
Well, I think it's dragging its heels because Manchester United are sticking to 50 million. And I don't think that's a bad price when it was 60 plus million in January. And you have a Langer that's gone for, I think it was 55, Noni Madueke 52. I know not all these players are identical, but they're all attackers ultimately, and it's an inflated market. Dango Ouattara was 42.5 million. So I think if Manchester United look at all these numbers, they'll say it's a fair price. But Chelsea know there's urgency to resolve this. And the last thing Manchester United want to do is be stuck with Garnacho with the window ending, paying his wage when they could have got pure profit on the books. So Chelsea are playing on that tactic, and inaction in many ways is a tactic. And if you wait and wait and wait, The price will be at its lowest in the final few days of the window. And Chelsea need to resolve Nkunku and Jackson. I don't think they just want to do Garnacho and Xavi Simons. And then I think there's a few other twists and moving parts. For example, if it's Villa for Nico Jackson, and again, that is an if, but Villa like Jackson. Emery had Jackson at Villarreal. So there's a link there. And if Chelsea are thinking the realistic two are Garnacho and Xavi Simons, but then Villa want Nico Jackson at 60, 70, 80 million, whatever the number is, I think Chelsea would at least ask the question about Morgan Rodgers in the same way that some reports suggest Spurs are going to ask the question on Morgan Rodgers. So we're at that stage of the window now where you get a bit of unexpected opportunism. So if you just wait, a name that you actually have wanted for quite some time might become available. I think it's less than 5% chance, maybe even not even a 1% chance that Villa will entertain business for Morgan Rodgers. But you can never say never because of their financial situation, even after selling the women's club to their parent company. But we also have to be very fair to Aston Villa in all of this too, that everyone's been saying, and rightly at the beginning of the window, that Emi Martinez might leave. He's still there. There's been talks and interest for Ollie Watkins. He's still there. There's been Saudi interest in Yuri Tielemans. He's still there. There's new Al Ahly interest in Amadou Onana. He's still there. They've got Jacob Ramsey and Leon Bailey out. Those are probably two big outgoings to satisfy their financial need. Now it's clear that after Evan Gesson's arrived, that they'd still like to do Marco Asensio and Nico Jackson, another striker opportunity too. So Villa seem to be looking at incomings now, which is probably a suggestion that in this latter part of the window, they do think their finances are in order. But let's see, because we're at the most unpredictable days now of the window. And the clear direction of travel has been Garnacho, Simons to Chelsea. I think Garnacho is still very likely. I think Xavi Simons very realistic. But don't be surprised if Chelsea tries something dramatic in the final days of the window, because it's Chelsea. And under this new ownership, they've always been audacious. And if they don't surprise us, I would almost be surprised.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think exits, listen, are very, very important. It isn't just balancing the books. It's nobody wants problems in the dressing room. And I don't mean bad eggs or bad players, but having a group, 4, 5, 6 players that are not really going to feature, not really going to play. We know historically, we've read, autobiographies, we've listened to managers, we've spoken to people that have owned clubs. It can create problem and disharmony. And we had it at Man United, actually, when our old number 2 goalkeeper, ironically, we spoke about number 2s today in Romero. We promised him a move and he didn't get one. And then he was kind of sitting around twiddling his thumbs. And there was a lot of talk that pissed off a lot of his teammates that are very good friends with him, because they're like, look, we want to be professional and we're going to be, but you've made promises to a friend of ours who's now, maybe he won't go to the World Cup. Maybe he won't do this. Maybe he won't do that. You made him promises. You've broken them. It does upset the dressing room. And you need to be very, very careful as a club to not create, to risk that kind of disharmony, especially in a season for Chelsea where they're looking to push on and go to that next level. Viewers, do us a big, big favor, please, and hit the like button if you haven't done so already. About 4,500 of you tuning in, which is amazing numbers for the channel. But please get the like button hit if you haven't done so already, and turn on the bell notification so you know when we go live. Now, obviously, we saw maybe one of the most dramatic 2 or 3 hours in football transfer history when Spurs were, everybody all day. I had thumbnails ready for the announcement, or the Here We Go, the Jacobs Cracker, the Ornstein Bomber, the Spurs, Eze, Palace, everything was at total agreement and it was over the line. And then it almost felt not out of nowhere, because we know the links were there. And I want to, again, to anyone who wasn't watching, Eze to Arsenal links, they were not just exclusively revealed by Ben Jacobs. It was on the Football Terrace. This comes out, and there's not enough flowers to Ben being given out, I think, in the industry for that. And not that Ben seeks it, but he deserves it. But we saw Arsenal come back in. They hijacked the deal. They've landed the player. Reports have suggested this, just in the last hour or so, that Crystal Palace and Arsenal have signed all the documents for the Eze move now as well.
Yeah, so a bit of backstory here. First of all, the flowers and all of that thing, it's our job to report on the news. So it's kind of funny how when we get something right, which is hopefully more often than not, you get a lot of praise and you think, well, that is the job. If you get it wrong more often than right, then you're not really doing your job. So not really in it for the catchphrases or the credit or anything like that. We're just working hard to try and bring you the news as accurately as we can. But the backstory here is, as you kind of allude to, back in June, as I broke, Eberechi Eze was added to Arsenal's list of targets. July, Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta met face-to-face with Eze over the course of a weekend, and they spoke for over 3 hours, and Eze was sold on Arsenal. We know he's an Arsenal fan. We know that he has a very strong emotional connection to the club. And basically, without discussing financials at that point, Eze said, I want to come back, because he spent his youth career at Arsenal. And we also know that Palace to Arsenal, these kind of moves happen and have happened historically. So there's always a bit of synergy between Crystal Palace and Arsenal. So it's very much a full circle moment now for Eberechi Eze. Then it went a little bit quiet. Arsenal went to Crystal Palace and said, we're not going to trigger the release clause. And then Ethan Nwaneri signed a new deal. And Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta and Tim Lewis decided Nwaneri is going to get time on the right and at number 10. Noni Madueke is going to get time on the right and time on the left. We're not so sure that we need a number 10. So Arsenal backed off. Concurrent with all of this June, July was Tottenham, who appreciated Eze, but backed off. And Tottenham sources in June, July said, we're not bidding. That proved to be correct as well. They went for Morgan Gibbs-White. They didn't get him. They triggered a release clause. Forest disputed it. Morgan Gibbs-White signed a new deal. Maddison injured his ACL. And then by about 2 weeks ago, Spurs said, we need to react. We're going to come in for Eberechi Eze. At that point, it was a one-horse race and Arsenal were not there. Then, ironically, because Tottenham were catalysed by Maddison's injury, Kai Havertz picked up an injury and Arsenal came back in. So it was a hijack, but Arsenal were also there first. And that legwork that took place in June, July, plus the fact that Eze, I think I said this on the Football Terrace as well, if both clubs agree a deal with Crystal Palace, Eze was always going to pick Arsenal, and Arsenal knew that. But adding to the craziness was another part of this story, that on the Friday before the Premier League season started, Eberechi Eze's 60 million plus 8 million release clause expired. And on that Friday, outside of that release clause, Tottenham were really close to agreeing a deal. Never had Richarlison in it, never any other player, always just straight cash. They were really close. And that's why Eze thought originally he might not play against Chelsea. Had Daniel Levy bitten the bullet, and hindsight is a wonderful thing because they didn't think Arsenal were going to enter the race on that Friday. Had Levy bitten the bullet on Friday and done the deal, Eberechi Eze would be holding up a Spurs shirt. Then flash forwards to the Tuesday, Crystal Palace were delaying a little bit because they knew by that point that Arsenal were going to enter. In addition, they were looking for a replacement. But on that Tuesday, as I broke, Spurs got to an agreement in principle with Crystal Palace for a similar number to Arsenal have done the deal for, 60 million plus add-ons. They also had terms in place with Eze, but Palace were delaying. Palace were looking for a replacement. Palace thought at that point that Eze would play in the Conference League last night. Arsenal moved by the Wednesday morning, knowing Havertz had a knee injury, and they got the deal done in about 2 hours, and they knew that they always had the player buy-in. So it was this incredible drama of Tottenham against Arsenal, both with agreements in principle. A lot of Spurs fans coming back to me after the story broke he was going to Arsenal saying, but didn't he have a deal with us? Yes, he did. Tottenham got the agreement in principle on the Tuesday afternoon. Arsenal got the agreement in principle on the Wednesday afternoon. But crucially, Crystal Palace knew that Arsenal were coming on Tuesday morning. So Eze was waiting for Arsenal to materialise. And once there were two horses in the race, Eze was always going to pick Arsenal. But yeah, one of the craziest stories of any window.
I think also, I mean, you've explained this many times over the last 2 to 3 years since we've been doing these shows together, that players can often sometimes agree personal terms with multiple clubs, not just two, but still have preferences. And I think sometimes fans and this isn't a dig at any other type of journalist, but sometimes people get suckered in by the sort of the lack of detail and the very short and concise updates, as opposed to listening to how they absolutely operate. And as you say, I think from a fan's perspective, which we all are fans of the game, it was just manic on Wednesday evening. I thoroughly enjoyed the night, if I'm being honest. It was funny watching the meltdowns. It was great watching the excitement. We had a guy that comes on our show, Gal, who a day or two before had done a video where when the agreement in principle was made with Palace, and he's an Arsenal fan, he was questioned. Someone said, what do you make of this deal that Spurs are getting over you? And he said, I don't believe it. I said, for me, I still think he'll be an Arsenal player. I said, Spurs can pay for his hotel room for the night, but it'll be coming to us. And everyone laughed at him. Now, he didn't know anything. It was just a fan reaction. And then essentially it's happened. And I've said all along, they should be getting him in for the announcement video. He should be walking out of a hotel, handing his key to check out, and it should be Gal should be the guy taking it off him. Yeah. They could make it would be brilliant. But yeah, it was an amazing night.
I think they're also
sorry, go on.
Challenge when you report these stories is that Chinese whispers kind of happen. So if you note my reporting, Tottenham have agreed a fee with Palace, and Palace are now seeking a replacement. So people hear agreement and they think with personal terms in place, that means the player's joining. And then people might twist that and say Eberechi Eze to join Spurs after fee agreed. But I didn't say joining Spurs. I said they've agreed a fee. I didn't say that there was medical booked. I didn't say that the deal was done. And the reason for that is because Palace were waiting on a replacement and Palace were waiting on Arsenal. And as we now know, but we didn't on that Tuesday, Eze was also waiting on Arsenal. So agreement in principle just means you've got the club-to-club bit done, and agreeing the terms or financials with the players doesn't mean that they have given you a green light. I know several Saudi deals where the fee's been agreed, the terms have been agreed with the player, but has the player said yes to Saudi and the project? Not yet. So Eberechi Eze was waiting and Palace were waiting. And I think Tottenham's error in this was not this week. Tottenham's error in this was on Friday when there was still an active release clause, or when they could have done the deal outside of the release clause. And Arsenal on that Friday were not in the race. By the time they got to Monday, Tuesday, Tottenham felt like Palace were the roadblock. Palace were looking for a replacement. Palace wanted to delay so they could have him play in the UEFA Conference League game on Thursday. Obviously, Arsenal put pay to that and said no, but Tottenham were prepared to let him play in that game. So Tottenham's error was not anticipating, but maybe they couldn't have done because it was partially, if not entirely, catalyzed by the Kai Havertz injury. So Tottenham thought they were in a one-horse race, and they ended up losing what was a two-horse race because they didn't anticipate the other horse in Arsenal coming from behind. Now, whether or not that's only on Daniel Levy, but I just think this late in the transfer window, if you're quibbling over small things for a player of Eze's caliber that would transform Tottenham's window and get the fan base excited, there's definitely a logic that on that Friday, even if Tottenham thought they were the only suitor at that point in the race, they should have bitten the bullet and made damn sure that they got Eze out of that match day squad, not risking him picking up an injury against Chelsea, sending a message to the market, this guy's out of the squad because we're signing him. Get the deal done on the Friday, and this story may not have unfolded. But as soon as we got to the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Kai Havertz's injury hit, Arsenal were intent on moving. And unfortunately for Tottenham, Arsenal versus Spurs for Eze, who's an Arsenal fan, who started his career at Arsenal, Tottenham were never going to win that race.
Certainly not. Keeping with Arsenal for a moment, so there have been multiple reports since then that I've heard names like Morgan Rogers, of course, Rodrygo, and loans have come up. Lookman's name's been mentioned. Have you heard any word of another addition for Arsenal, maybe a more left-sided player that Arsenal fans are still wanting and sort of desperate for? Could there be any more movement, or do you get the sense that barring exits, this could be it for Arsenal?
Yeah, I think the long-term plan will probably be to find a starting left winger, because remember, Eze is still considered a 10, and it wouldn't surprise me if in the long run there is still a departure of Leandro Trossard, which is why his terms have been improved, but his contract length hasn't been extended. And there might still be an upgrade possible on Gabriel Martinelli as well. So we've said it many times on the shows, both extremes, they either extend or get improved terms or they go. And that's proven to be the case with Trossard, where there were clubs exploring an exit for Trossard, Dortmund and even Brentford earlier in the window. So Arsenal were open to a Trossard exit, but nobody met their terms. So they rewarded him, and that's where we're at the moment. But yes, in the long run, a left winger could come in. But I think at the moment, Arsenal feel okay simply because Eze can go 10 or wide left. Noni Madueke can go right or left. Martinelli and Trossard are still there. So there's 4 options on that left-hand side. Even if one of them somehow departed between now and the end of the window, you would think it can't be Trossard or they wouldn't have given him improved terms. But let's just say in a hypothetical world, as I've said many times, Saudi come in for Gabriel Martinelli to the tune of 80 to 100 million euros, then you are still left with 3 options. But in that circumstance, you never know. They might make a late addition, but that would be unexpected because Arsenal at the moment want to keep Gabriel Martinelli. So that might be that as far as attack-minded additions for Arsenal are concerned. And I think if you look at Arsenal's window, it only really got going in June. And now they have Kepa, once the most expensive goalkeeper in the world, a steal as a number 2 at 5 million. You've got Mosquera, who's going to be the one that surprises Arsenal fans because my understanding is the feeling is he's ready for serious minutes this season. And I think people are going to realize very quickly what a player this kid is. Norgard, economical, a very Mikel Arteta signing, does the job, very similar in my opinion to when they signed Jorginho, low risk, small fee, Zubimendi, box office signing. Everybody was excited about that even in January when we first heard reports that it was almost agreed. Gyökeres, the striker that they've been craving for so long. Eze should really excite the fan base. And again, I expect Noni Madueke to surprise a lot of Arsenal fans and be a really valuable squad player. So right at the start of the window, and even in March when I broke an exclusive, and I said Arsenal are going to spend 250 million or more this window. And by the end of the window, Arsenal's volume of business and Arsenal's total spend, I'm not talking about net spend, I'm just talking about what they've put towards transfers, it's going to be somewhere close to Liverpool's by the end of the window. Now, if Liverpool don't get Isak, I'll be right. If Liverpool get Isak, then that will be so crazy that, of course, they won't be like for like. But right now, it's everything that I anticipated from Arsenal, a big window, several signings throughout the team. And if now they put their feet up and there are no new incomings and they relax in the final 10 days of the window, I think Andrea Berta will have done a very good job and Arsenal will have had an outstanding window.
I think everybody would fervently agree with you. I mean, it's phenomenal players in so many positions. The backups have been very good, and they've set themselves up brilliantly. And as you say at the beginning of that, there is still the potential with the right exits for something else. But if not now, in the longer term as well. Viewers, get that like button, hit. Make sure you are subscribing to the channel as well. Very important to us that you get both those things done. Obviously, one of the longest standing sagas this summer, many people believe could come to a head after Monday night's clash between Newcastle and Liverpool. What is are there any further developments after the joints, not the joint statements, but the statements that were released on, I think that was Tuesday evening that happened, another crazy night, if we're being honest. Is there still thought of a new bid for Alexander Isak from Liverpool?
Well, I think first of all, the game probably has to get out the way and there's games around the game and then we might see the true reality. Obviously, if Newcastle give encouragement, Liverpool will bid. I'm told they're not looking at 150. It's still closer to the 120 when they informed Newcastle that they were prepared to bid earlier in the window. And it still feels intertwined with Yoane Wissa and other attack-minded targets. But there's still definitely a scenario where Liverpool bid. They've not walked away. They've not given up. Had they done so, I think they'd be bidding for other targets at this point, because if Liverpool close the window without Alexander Isak, they're going to need another attacker in some capacity, almost certainly. So if they're just sitting waiting, that would suggest that Alexander Isak, in Liverpool's eyes, might still be possible. I think Newcastle's statement was firm and it didn't inflame anything, but it wasn't like the Philippe Coutinho one from Liverpool. It didn't say the player is categorically not for sale. It actually alluded to conditions of a sale. So if there's conditions of a sale, then that means the player is not for sale. That means the player is for sale at the right price or under the right circumstances. So is there a chance that Isak stays? Obviously. But I think Liverpool haven't given up. They're just waiting for that encouragement. And I would suspect, maybe I'm proven wrong, maybe the bid comes in on a Friday because Liverpool love a bid on a Friday. Maybe it comes on the match day -1 for pure theatre and drama. But I think it more likely, if we are to get Isak movement, it will be after that Monday night game.
I agree. We've seen Newcastle obviously put a bid in of 35 million plus 5, again, exclusively revealed by yourself on August 20th. The report is that's been rejected. Is a new bid expected for him? Plus, we have seen some fairly strong links to Larsen of Wolves as also another target. What can you tell us about, because we would all assume that part of the conditions are them finding replacements. So what is the latest with Newcastle striker Hunt?
Yeah, Wissa's seen as a Callum Wilson replacement. So some say it might influence the Isak saga. Others say they need 2. Let's see, because I think Newcastle are going to be very busy spinning multiple plates. Last bid for Wissa, as I broke, 35 million, 5 million in add-ons. Add-ons difficult, rejected pretty quickly by Brentford. Wissa wants Newcastle. Let's see if Tottenham enter the race now. They're looking for other attackers. Wissa wants to play Champions League football. He doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia at this stage. But interestingly, the Saudi window is open for a few more days after the UK and European windows shut. So there might still be the possibility of an exit to Saudi Arabia for Wissa if he can't get a Champions League club. But Wissa only wants a Premier League and Champions League club. He's got his heart set on Newcastle United. So now we have to see if Newcastle make another bid, because Brentford sources have said throughout the summer the price was 50. And in the last few weeks, they've even suggested it's 60 because they want to ward off the market. I think if Newcastle came back with a fixed offer of 40 or 45, plus some add-ons, they might still stand a chance here if Brentford find a 9, because that's the other thing in all of this. And that's the irony that Newcastle want Wissa, and yet Brentford need a replacement because Dango Ouattara is the Mbumo replacement. So Brentford need another 9. Liverpool want Isak, but Newcastle need a replacement. So you've actually got 2 parallel stories with a lot of similarities. Yeah. And I think that if we are to get a breakthrough, the Wissa to Newcastle one might come a bit quicker than the Isak to Liverpool one, because of the fact, even if Newcastle argue we need Wissa plus 1 more, at least if they get Wissa, it might open up the door or give a higher likelihood to Liverpool succeeding with Alexander Isak. So I think Liverpool fans can take some encouragement if Wissa joins Newcastle, even though at the moment Newcastle are saying Wissa is Wilson, not Isak replacement, and Brentford are saying Wissa can't go unless we find a replacement of our own. And that's what I mean about it being the most unpredictable part of the window, because when you spell it out like that, it gives everyone a headache and it is quite complicated. And a lot of clubs are waiting on other clubs and market movement before they can bid with any kind of confidence for the players they're looking for. With Jørgen Strand Larsen, Wolves' position is really clear. I'm not saying Newcastle won't try, and he's definitely one of the names on the Newcastle list, but Wolves don't want to sell. Is there some astronomical figure that could change their mind? I think you can never say never at this stage of the window, but Wolves sources right now are telling us that they're ruling out a sale, that they don't want to sell at any price. Again, I preface that, making it really clear. There probably always is a price in football, but Wolves don't want to lose Larsen. They're going to be really firm in that position. So if it is to develop with Newcastle, I suspect it's going to be a very difficult negotiation.
I'm not, I was smirking, not at what you were saying per se, but I found this Isak, for many years now, I've had this sort of, I don't care about this player loyalty nonsense, in the sense of, I've seen some big accounts in the last few days tweet that players that go on strike should be banned. As a working class man, who had a grandfather that was very heavily involved in the unions, I'm never an advocate for punishing people per se for strike action. I think there's certain jobs where you shouldn't be allowed to, where you can't strike, police being one of them. I get why they're kind of ring fenced. But I've completely lost all resolve and all sympathy for fans that cry about loyalty when they're very happy for it to work in reverse, whether that be their club ostracizing a player like Man United with Rasmus to move him on. That's fine. We'll put you in the reserves if you don't leave. That's okay. But Newcastle chasing a Wolves player where the club are saying he's not for sale and the fans saying, go on, guys, bid more. It's like, hang on a minute. You're crying that Liverpool are trying to unsettle your player. You got the Wissa situation where they're saying bid a respectful amount and you're bidding under that. Yet your media is telling Liverpool they're a disgrace for not bidding what you want. This is not the actions of either club. The actions of every single club, I feel, is all fair in love and war. It's the hypocrisy. And I'm not saying this is just Newcastle fans. I think all fan bases are guilty of this. It's the rank hypocrisy in only caring about it in certain directions. And maybe that's part of the game. But for me, I'm so over it now, Ben. It's like, no, this is how transfers work. For me, it's a little bit, what's that expression? If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, is my sort of view on this.
Yeah, I think this window will probably change the dynamic, particularly of how agents think about deals. Because if you're coming into Newcastle now, if you're coming into Brentford, if you're coming into Brighton, even though they're historically very fair to their players, but if you think back to Caicedo and trying to force his way out in the window before he moved when Arsenal and Chelsea were bidding, I think a lot of players that see a move to a Premier League club at Wolves' level, at Brighton's level, at Brentford's level, some might even say Newcastle. And this, by the way, is not me being disrespectful to those clubs, because I'm not saying that any of them are small clubs. They've all got great fan bases, and I construe all the Premier League clubs as equal. I'm only speaking about it in financial terms, and I'm only speaking about it in circumstantial terms. And by that, I mean, right now, your Brentfords, your Brightons do not have Champions League football, and your Newcastles do not have a Big Six wage bill. So any player moving to that club now, if it works, will either go, great, we're going to elevate this club and we're going to get the wage we're looking for and we're going to get Champions League, or they're going to get an opportunity for more money and Champions League somewhere else. So this is not saying Brentford, Brighton, Newcastle are smaller than any other club, because that's entirely disrespectful and incorrect. They're all amazing Premier League clubs with great fan bases. So it's like for like, you're playing in the same league. But naturally, over time, a player at one of those clubs might get an opportunity to go and earn more money or go and play Champions League football. So what we're seeing is Isak thinking he had a verbal promise to leave. Isak thinking he was going to get a contract and not getting one. Wissa believing there's a verbal pact. And too often, the story is always verbal or gentleman's agreement or conversation or price being named. So there's that trust, but it's not written. And I think what we're going to see now is maybe more agents, when players join these type of clubs, asking for something formal, asking for something in writing, asking for a release clause, which is not at all prevalent in the Premier League, but is obviously commonplace in other leagues around the world. Because then it's black and white. There's a number there. The number might be high, the number might be low, but if everyone accepts the number in writing when you join, then ultimately, if you have this situation, somebody can buy out Alexander Isak. And I can guarantee you, if Isak joins Newcastle, the release clause number would not be as high as Liverpool are prepared to pay now, because when he joined, I think it was for 60 million. No one would have thought that so quickly he'd become a player that might be worth 120 to 150 million. So you might end up getting a good deal off the release clause. Release clauses, even though Barcelona do it this way, they're not always there to ward off the market. Sometimes they're there to accept that if a player progresses in 2-3 years, there's a number that suits all parties. I think that was definitely the case with Matheus Cunha, 62.5 million. It was viewed as fair by Wolves. It was viewed as fair by Cunha, and Man United ended up paying it. So in the end, they viewed it as fair as well. Yeah. And I think we'll see more of that going forwards, where players either join with a number, or more likely they join without a number. They stay, they do well, they get rewarded within 2 years, but some kind of number, like with Cunha, is baked into the contract. And I think players, because they've seen Isak's struggles and Wissa's struggles, and agents, therefore, are going to start tabling that these clauses have to be inserted if they're to extend at clubs or sometimes join clubs, to make sure that these sagas don't happen time and time and time, because it feels like they're beginning to happen more and more public. And I don't think any fan base wants to see Isak and Wissa's sagas play out this publicly.
No, I agree. I think they're going to have to, move in that way. And some people won't like hearing this, but I think clubs have probably created this, because I do get the feeling there's too many players saying it for me. There's no smoke without fire. I think there are some type of promises being made that are not being fulfilled. There's trust that's being broken. So that is just going to lead to the players and the players' union saying, well, everything you now promise has to be contracted, written down as an example. There's a super chat here that says, when you need an urgent organ transplant to save your life and you don't get one straight away, it feels like United are in the shit. Titanic 2.0 is back. I wouldn't go that far. I don't think Man United not signing a new midfielder is going to lead to the death of our football club, because, again, I think your analogy is too extreme. Personally, United are not going to stop being Man United and cease to exist if we don't get Belieber this summer. So I wouldn't. I think it's a false equivalence of doing that. The example you could use is we're about to go bankrupt and we need a new owner quickly to pay off some debts, and we ignore it. That is maybe a better example of urgent organs being needed. Look, I want to thank everyone who's tuned into the show today. We're going to be back live at 3 p.m. today. So 3 p.m. UK time, myself, Staffy and Don on Straight Facts, all the latest news, plus previewing the Premier League is being played for tonight. West Ham, Chelsea. So lots to talk about on Straight Facts this afternoon. So thank you to everyone that's tuned in. I'd love to see all 4,600 of you back 3 p.m. UK time. That would be amazing. Ben, always a pleasure, mate, to sit here and talk football with you.
Always a pleasure. Look forward to next week. See you on the United stand. See you on the Dumb Deal show. And next week's going to be big, isn't it? Because it'll be our final one before the window shuts. It's going to be massive. Listen, everybody, take care. Goodbye. God bless. And we will see you all again very, very soon. Peace.